She, too, felt the same pull. Life was still heavy with responsibilities, but there was a spark that made ordinary days brighter. She found herself smiling at small memories of him, playing their conversations in her mind and imagining moments yet to come. It was a strange feeling, a quiet certainty that something significant was growing between them. One afternoon, he decided it was time to show her how much she meant, not just through words, but through action. He remembered the first rainy day when they met, and how that brief act of sharing an umbrella had sparked a connection neither could ignore. He wanted to recreate that moment, but with a gesture that was deeper, more intentional. He planned it carefully, ensuring that everything felt natural, sincere, and thoughtful. He waited for a day when the sky was gray and the rain had just begun to fall lightly. He arrived at their favorite park, carrying a small, well-chosen gift, a simple, handwritten letter tucked into a tiny envelope, along with a single flower, something delicate but meaningful. He stood near the corner where they first met under the rain, a spot that had quietly become important to both of them. Meanwhile, she had decided to take a walk in the park, needing a moment of solitude after a particularly long day. The rain had just started, soft and gentle, coating the streets and trees with a fresh scent of earth. She carried her small umbrella and walked slowly, thinking about the week and the challenges she had faced. She didn't expect to see anyone familiar, yet a small part of her heart hoped that she might. And then she saw him. He was standing there, slightly soaked but smiling, holding the envelope and flower in his hand. For a moment she froze, her heart beating faster than usual. It was a sight that made her feel unexpectedly light, even though the weight of her worries still lingered. "I know it's been a week full of misunderstandings and small storms," he began, his voice soft but steady. "But I wanted to show you. I wanted to remind you that what we have is real, even if life sometimes makes it complicated." She blinked, unsure how to respond. He extended the envelope and the flower toward her. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me." She accepted the flower first, feeling the delicate petals between her fingers. Then she opened the envelope and read the letter. It was simple, honest, and heartfelt, expressing his feelings in a way that was both vulnerable and sincere. It spoke of small moments that had grown into deep appreciation, of quiet observations that had turned into admiration, and of a wish to continue walking together through whatever life had in store. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming warmth of being seen, understood, and cherished. She looked up at him, words failing her for a moment. He simply smiled, giving her the space to process the gesture without pressure. "I didn't know you felt this way," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I've felt it for a while," he replied. "I just wanted to make sure you knew. Not with grand displays, but with honesty. I care about you truly." The rain continued to fall around them, light and gentle, as if the world itself was witnessing the moment. She reached out and held his hand, a gesture that spoke volumes without the need for more words. He squeezed her hand gently, feeling a sense of relief and happiness that was almost physical in its intensity. They walked together under his umbrella, sharing the small space as they moved slowly through the park. Neither felt the need for long explanations or justifications. The gesture had said everything that needed to be said. There was a quiet understanding between them, a realization that love wasn't about perfection, but about honesty, care, and being present for each other, even when life was messy. Over the next few days, their interactions became richer, more intentional. They made time for each other despite their busy lives, finding moments in cafes, parks, and quiet streets to share thoughts, laughter, and support. He learned more about her world, the challenges she faced, the dreams she held quietly to herself, and the ways she navigated life with courage. She, in turn, learned about his vulnerabilities, his past hurts, and the moments that had shaped him into someone cautious but deeply caring. One evening, after a long day at work, she received a message from him. "Meet me at the park bench near the fountain." She hesitated briefly, a mixture of fatigue and anticipation coursing through her, but ultimately agreed. When she arrived, he was already there. Sitting with a thermos of tea and 2 small cups, "I thought we could share a quiet moment," he said, offering her a cup. "Just the 2 of us, away from everything else." She smiled, accepting the cup and sitting beside him. They didn't need to speak immediately. They watched the fountain together, listening to the soft rush of water, feeling the cool evening air on their faces. It was a comfortable silence, one that allowed them to simply be together without words or expectations. After a few minutes, she spoke. "I've been thinking about everything. About how we've grown closer despite the challenges. I was afraid at first, that life would make it too hard." He nodded, listening intently. "I know, I've been afraid too. Afraid that I might mess it up, or that I wouldn't be enough for you. But being with you, it makes all the fear worth it." They talked for hours, sharing dreams, fears, and small secrets. He admitted moments when he felt unsure about opening up. She shared times when she felt overwhelmed by her responsibilities and doubt. Through the conversation, they discovered a new depth to their connection, a reassurance that they could face life's challenges together as the evening grew darker. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I've been keeping a little record," he said, showing her pages filled with observations, thoughts, and memories about their time together. "Nothing fancy. Just things that made me smile. Things I noticed about you." She looked through the pages, touched by the care and attention. There were small drawings of places they had been, notes about her laughter, reminders of little moments that had left an impression. She felt a rush of emotion, a deep appreciation for someone who noticed the details that mattered most. I don't know what to say," she whispered, holding the notebook close. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I just wanted you to know that someone sees you, really sees you, and cares about every part of who you are." At that moment, she realized the depth of her feelings. It wasn't just admiration or fondness. It was something stronger, something that had grown quietly through shared moments, understanding and patience. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both vulnerability and certainty. "I feel the same," she said softly. "I've been scared to admit it, but I do. I care about you. More than I realized." He smiled, a gentle, relieved smile, and they sat together, holding hands, feeling the warmth of connection that had been tested, nurtured, and grown. It was a quiet, beautiful realization that love wasn't about grand gestures alone. It was about small, consistent acts of care, honesty, and presence. In the days that followed, their bond deepened further. He made small surprises, like bringing her favorite tea when she had a long day, or leaving notes in places she would find them unexpectedly. She, in turn, shared small joys and little victories, letting him into her world more fully than ever before. Their lives, though still busy and complicated, now included each other in a meaningful, intentional way. By the end of Part 4, they had reached a turning point. The misunderstandings of the past were no longer barriers. They had become lessons. The small gestures, heartfelt words, and quiet presence of each other had transformed their connection into something deeply rooted. They had realized that love wasn't about perfection, grand declarations, or dramatic moments. It was about honesty, care, shared experiences, and the courage to be vulnerable. As they walked together through the park one evening, the sky painted in warm hues of sunset, they felt a sense of peace and anticipation. Life would still bring challenges, but they had discovered a foundation strong enough to withstand storms. Hand in hand, hearts open, they walked quietly, knowing that the most meaningful moments of love often grew in simplicity, patience, and genuine care. And in that gentle, unspoken understanding, they felt the quiet joy of realizing that their story, once uncertain and fragile, is now beginning to flourish in a way that neither could have imagined. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm for both of them, a rhythm that was gentle, comforting, and deeply meaningful. After the challenges and misunderstandings they had faced, the bond they shared had grown stronger, more resilient, and filled with a warmth that neither had experienced before. Their days were still full of responsibilities, worries, and the ordinary struggles of life. But now, there was a presence that made even the heaviest moments easier to bear. One bright morning, she woke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. The city was slowly coming to life, the streets filling with the familiar rhythm of cars, bicycles, and people hurrying to work. She stretched, feeling a lightness in her chest, a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. Today, she thought, felt different. Perhaps it was the way the sunlight spilled across her small apartment, or perhaps it was the quiet excitement of knowing he would be a part of her day. The rain had started gently at first, a soft tapping on the rooftops, but soon it turned heavier, drenching the streets and the few people brave enough to be outside. She was one of those people, running along the crowded sidewalks with an old umbrella that had a small hole in the corner. Every time the wind blew, a thin stream of water fell directly on her shoulder. She didn't mind much. She was used to small discomforts. Life had taught her to move fast, to keep going no matter what. She had a job waiting for her in the evening, and she couldn't be late again. Her boss was strict, and she needed this work to pay the bills and care for her younger brother, who was depending on her completely. She ducked under a small shop awning, trying to catch her breath. The city was noisy, even in the rain, with horns, shouting vendors, and the soft splash of footsteps on wet pavement. She took a moment to pull her hair out of her face and noticed a man standing a few feet away. He was tall, wearing a coat that looked expensive, with a scarf loosely draped around his neck. He held an umbrella that was too small to cover himself completely. His eyes, however, were fixed somewhere else, far away. Like he was thinking about something heavy. She tried to ignore him and started walking again. But she noticed that the man was struggling. His umbrella turned inside out for a moment, and he cursed quietly under his breath. It was one of those moments when she couldn't help herself. Even though they were strangers, she found herself walking over. "Here," she said, holding her umbrella out toward him. "You can share mine. It's small, but it works." He looked surprised. There was a pause where he seemed unsure what to do, almost as if he hadn't expected kindness from anyone. Then slowly he nodded. "Thank you," he said. His voice was calm but soft, carrying a hint of something sad beneath the surface. They walked together under her umbrella. It wasn't enough to keep them both completely dry, so water dripped onto their coats and shoes, but neither seemed to care. She noticed how his hair had small drops of rain clinging to it, and he noticed her damp scarf sticking to her neck. "I didn't think anyone would stop in this weather," he said after a moment. There was a quiet smile in his words, and she felt a little warmth in her chest. "I don't like seeing people struggle," she replied, "especially when it's raining like this." They walked in silence for a few blocks. She kept glancing at him, curious about who he was. Didn't seem like the kind of person who talked easily to strangers. But there was something gentle in the way he moved, almost careful. And then, as they crossed a busy street, a car splashed water from a puddle right onto her shoes. She laughed, more from frustration than amusement. And he instinctively tried to shield her with his arm. "Even though the umbrella barely helped?" "That's some luck," he said, smiling slightly. "Or maybe bad luck, depending on how you see it." She laughed again, and something about the sound made him pause. It was bright and real, a rare thing in a city filled with noise, but little feeling. As they reached a small park at the corner of the street, the rain began to slow. She offered him her umbrella one last time before turning to go. "Well, this is where I leave you," she said. He looked at her and hesitated. "I thank you. Really? I didn't expect this." She shrugged, smiling naturally. "Sometimes people need a little help, that's all. I'm just glad I could offer it." And then she was gone, disappearing down a side street, leaving him standing there, looking after her as if he couldn't believe she was real. For some reason, he found himself thinking about her long after she disappeared from view. There was something about the way she moved, the way she laughed, the quiet strength in her that left a mark he couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, she walked quickly, trying not to think about him. She had work to do, bills to pay, a little brother waiting at home, and a life that demanded focus. Yet a small smile lingered on her face. She couldn't explain why, but that brief encounter had left her feeling lighter, like someone had quietly reminded her that kindness still existed in the world. Over the next few days, she found herself revisiting that moment in her mind. The city was busy, and people were rushing past, faces blurred by umbrellas and raincoats. But she couldn't shake the memory of his eyes, the quiet voice that had thanked her so genuinely. She wondered if she would ever see him again, but life moved fast. She had no time to dwell on strangers. For him, it was different. He had spent years keeping himself distant, avoiding attachments because they always seemed to end in pain. He had focused on his work, on appearances, on keeping his life in perfect order. Yet meeting her had stirred something he didn't expect. It was subtle, almost frightening, the idea that someone could appear in his life and shift the carefully constructed balance he had maintained. He didn't understand it, but he felt drawn to her, curious, hoping somehow their paths would cross again. Days turned into a week, and the city continued its usual rhythm. She went to work, carried groceries home, helped her brother with schoolwork, and did everything that life demanded of her. He attended meetings, signed documents, and kept the world at a safe distance. Yet both found themselves remembering small details, the way she had tucked her hair behind her ear when the rain fell, the way he had laughed quietly when she slipped on the wet pavement. And then, one rainy afternoon, their paths crossed again, almost by accident. She was hurrying to catch a bus, her umbrella struggling against the wind. He was walking down the same street, lost in thought, when he noticed her struggling with the umbrella. Without thinking, he stepped closer. "Here, let me help," he said, holding the umbrella over her as they stopped to untangle it. She looked up, surprised to see him standing there again, as if fate had decided to intervene. "Really? You again?" she said, laughing. "Do you follow me in the rain?" "No," he replied, smiling, though there was a softness in his eyes. "I just noticed you." They laughed together, a sound that blended with the rain, creating a small moment of connection in the middle of the city chaos. For the first time, they spoke longer than a few words, sharing small stories about their day, their favorite places in the city, and little things that made them happy. Neither wanted the moment to end, even as the bus approached and she had to hurry. "Maybe we'll run into each other again," he said quietly, almost like a wish rather than a statement. "Maybe," she replied, smiling. And then she was gone again, leaving him to wonder if it was just a coincidence or something more. From that day on, small encounters started happening more often. He would see her at the library, carrying a stack of books, or at a corner cafe, quietly sipping tea while reading. She noticed him too, the quiet man who seemed to appear in the most unexpected moments. Neither spoke at first, just exchanged glances and small smiles. It was a slow, unspoken connection, fragile yet undeniable. And through it all, both of them began to feel something new. Something that wasn't just attraction or curiosity. Was the beginning of trust, the start of a bond that could grow into something deeper. They were strangers, yes, but in each brief encounter, they were learning about each other, about the comfort that comes from someone noticing you in a world that often ignores small acts of kindness. By the end of the week, both of them found themselves thinking more about the other than they would admit to anyone. She would replay their conversations in her mind, feeling warmth she hadn't felt in years. He would remember her laughter, her resilience, her quiet strength, feel something stir in his chest that he hadn't allowed himself to feel for a long time. It was simple, really just a man and a woman noticing each other in the rain, sharing umbrellas and exchanging smiles. But sometimes the simplest moments are the ones that leave the deepest mark. In a city full of strangers with lives that rarely intersect, two paths had crossed, and neither would ever be the same again. As she returned home that evening, wet shoes squishing slightly with every step, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Life was still hard, still full of struggles and responsibilities, but for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. And somewhere, not far away, he felt the same, a quiet hope. The realization that sometimes the universe has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time. And that was just the beginning. After that rainy week, life returned to its usual rhythm for both of them, but neither could forget the brief encounters that had started to feel important. She moved through her days with the weight of responsibilities pressing on her shoulders. Yet she carried a small, quiet anticipation, a hope that she might see him again. Every time she walked down a familiar street, She couldn't help but glance at the corners, the cafes, and the parks, wondering if he might be there. For him, it was similar. He went through the motions of his structured life, attending meetings and handling work with precision. But somewhere in the quiet moments, his thoughts wandered to her, remembered the way she had held her umbrella, the way she laughed when the rain splashed her shoes, and the gentle determination in her eyes. He realized that the brief conversations and small smiles had started to mean more than he expected. One afternoon, a week later, she was sitting in a small cafe she often visited after finishing work. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening with reflections of the city lights. She sipped her coffee slowly, enjoying a few minutes of peace before heading home. She looked out the window, noticing people passing by with umbrellas, and her eyes lingered on the familiar shapes of the streets and the passing crowd, and then she saw him. He was standing outside the cafe, looking down at his phone, umbrella tucked under his arm. Her heart skipped a beat. He looked up, their eyes met, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to fade. She smiled softly, and he returned the gesture, small but meaningful. Without thinking, she waved, and he nodded before stepping inside the cafe. "Hey," he said, his voice calm, carrying a warmth that made her feel at ease. "Hi," she replied, smiling, feeling a little nervous, despite the casual greeting. "I didn't expect to see you here. I come here sometimes," he said. "I guess today was the day I ran into someone I didn't expect to see." They laughed quietly, and for the first time, they sat together. Not just standing under an umbrella or exchanging hurried words. The table was small, the chairs close, and the sounds of the cafe's soft music, clinking cups, and quiet chatter created a sense of intimacy. They started talking more freely, sharing details about their days, their routines, and the little things that made them smile. She told him about her younger brother, how she tried to balance work and school while taking care of him, and how sometimes it felt like the world was too heavy for her to carry alone. He listened carefully, not interrupting, simply nodding, and occasionally asking gentle questions. She noticed the attention in his eyes, the genuine care that went beyond polite conversation. "I can't imagine how hard it must be," he said softly, "but I can see why you keep going. You have a strength most people don't." She shrugged, feeling a little self-conscious. "I don't know about that. I just do what I have to. It's not always easy, but it's what life requires." He nodded, understanding without judgment. "It's impressive," he said. "I've spent years avoiding challenges like that. I focused on work, on appearances, on keeping everything in control. But seeing someone who faces life head-on, it's inspiring." Conversation flowed naturally, and before long, they were laughing together, sharing stories of small mistakes, embarrassing moments, and memories that made them smile. It felt easy, as if they had known each other longer than just a few brief encounters. She realized that she felt safe with him, a rare feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. And he felt a similar comfort, a quiet connection that made him feel less alone in a world he had always tried to manage alone. As the afternoon turned into evening, the cafe grew quieter. People had left, leaving only a few scattered tables occupied by others lost in their own conversations. The light outside shifted to a soft glow as the sun began to set and the city took on a golden hue. They continued talking, unaware of the time, enjoying the simplicity of being together without the pressures of their separate lives. Eventually, she glanced at her watch and realized it was time to leave. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "I understand," he replied, though there was a hint of disappointment in his voice. "But I hope this isn't the last time we meet like this." "Neither do I," she said softly, smiling. They stood, gathered their things, and stepped outside. The streets were wet but free of rain now, and the air smelled fresh, carrying a hint of the city mixed with the lingering scent of rain. As they parted ways that evening, a feeling lingered between them, unspoken but undeniable. They both knew this was more than coincidence. Their lives were beginning to intersect in ways neither had expected. It was the start of something gentle but meaningful, a bond forming in small, shared moments rather than grand gestures. Over the next few days, they began noticing each other in unexpected places, He would see her walking through a park, reading on a bench, or carrying groceries home. She would notice him in quiet corners of the library, studying with focus or lost in thought. At first, they didn't approach each other every time, sometimes simply exchanging glances or small smiles. But each encounter left a growing sense of anticipation, a quiet joy in noticing someone who seemed to understand without words the small struggles and joys of life. One Saturday morning, she was waiting at a bus stop, the sun just beginning to rise over the city skyline. She held a small bag of groceries, and her thoughts wandered to her week-ahead work, bills, her brother's school assignments. The familiar rhythm of life felt heavy, but she felt a small spark of excitement, hoping she might see him again. As if on cue, he appeared at the bus stop, carrying a briefcase in one hand and a coffee in the other. Their eyes met, and they both smiled, a little shyly at first, but then more naturally. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that made her feel light despite the weight of her responsibilities. "Good morning," she replied, smiling. They started talking again, sharing stories of the week, small triumphs, and minor frustrations. She told him about a project at work that went surprisingly well, and he shared a story about a difficult decision at work that he had handled differently than expected. Their conversation was easy, flowing naturally, filled with small moments of laughter and understanding. As the bus arrived, they both hesitated for a moment, not wanting the conversation to end. She stepped forward, ready to board, and he followed, insisting they sit together. They talked all the way to the next stop, finding comfort in each other's presence, discovering new sides of themselves in the process. It was during these small, ordinary moments that their connection grew. They didn't need dramatic gestures or elaborate plans. It was the shared laughter over spilled coffee, the understanding nod when life felt overwhelming, the simple joy of someone noticing and caring. Each encounter added a layer of trust, a sense that they could rely on each other in ways neither had experienced before. Over time, they began to anticipate these moments, looking forward to the next encounter. She started leaving a little earlier from work, hoping to catch him at the park or cafe. He found himself adjusting his schedule subtly, making sure he would be in the same places at the same time. Neither admitted it out loud, but both were aware of the growing importance of these interactions. One evening, as they walked together after meeting at a small bookstore, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. They stopped at a quiet corner, watching the city lights reflect on the wet streets. He turned to her, his eyes soft. "I'm glad we keep running into each other," he said quietly. "Me too," she replied. "It feels nice, comfortable, like we're not alone in the chaos." He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of belonging. A quiet happiness that wasn't tied to success or appearances, but to the simple fact of being with someone who noticed him. They lingered a little longer, talking about dreams, small wishes, and the things they found beautiful in everyday life. She told him about her love for small city parks, the way sunlight hits puddles after rain, and the comfort of a warm cup of tea on a cold evening. He shared stories of quiet walks in hidden streets, books that had moved him, and the rare moments that made him feel alive. By the time they parted that evening, both felt a sense of anticipation for the next meeting. Their lives were still complicated, filled with responsibilities and challenges. But these small encounters created a space where they could simply be themselves, without judgment or pressure. It was a quiet love, growing gently but surely. It's built on understanding, shared moments, and a deep sense of connection. And so, the days passed. Rain or shine, work or leisure, they continued to notice each other, share small conversations, and build a bond that was stronger than either expected. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was real, meaningful, and beautiful in its simplicity. The city was vast and filled with strangers, yet they had found each other, discovering that love sometimes begins quietly, in the gentle spaces between everyday moments. By the end of the second week, both of them had started to realize that what they were feeling was more than friendship. There was a warmth that lingered after every conversation, a quiet excitement at the thought of the next encounter. and a sense that their lives had become a little brighter simply because the other existed. Neither could predict where it would lead, but both knew, with a certainty they hadn't felt in years, that something important was beginning, and in that quiet, ordinary way, love had started to bloom. Life had begun to feel different for both of them. The small moments they shared, the quiet coffees, the walks in the park, the gentle laughter over spilled drinks had become the highlights of their days. Yet, as their bond grew, so did the complexities of life. Neither of them had expected that growing closer could also mean facing doubts, fears, and misunderstandings that neither had experienced before. She had been working extra hours that week, trying to save money for her brother's school supplies and to cover a sudden rent increase. By the time she finally returned home, she was exhausted, her shoulders aching, and her mind filled with a mix of worry and frustration. She wanted to call him to share a small piece of her day, but hesitated. She didn't want to burden him with her problems or appear weak. He, on the other hand, had a week full of unexpected challenges at work. A project he had invested months in suddenly faced setbacks, and colleagues questioned his decisions. His mind was clouded with stress, leaving little room for thought about anything else. When he did have a free moment, he found himself thinking about her, about the conversations and smiles that had become a comfort. But he wasn't sure if he should reach out that day. He worried that contacting her when he wasn't in a good mood might send the wrong message. It was on a rainy Wednesday evening when their first real misunderstanding occurred. She had been waiting at a cafe they both liked, hoping to meet him for a quick conversation before heading home. She arrived early, settling into a corner seat with her umbrella drying beside her. She ordered a tea and watched the rain through the window, expecting him to arrive any moment. Minutes passed, then 10, then 20. She tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Frustration began to creep in. She wondered why he hadn't shown up. Had he forgotten? Was he avoiding her? Her thoughts raced, creating stories that were far from reality, each one more painful than the last. She felt a knot in her stomach, a feeling of disappointment she hadn't expected to experience. Meanwhile, he was stuck in a traffic jam caused by a sudden downpour. His umbrella useless in the wind and rain as he rushed through the streets. His phone battery had died, leaving him unable to call or text. By the time he reached the cafe, wet and flustered, she was gone. He spotted her reflection in the glass door as he approached, but it was too late. She had left, and the cafe was empty, except for the barista wiping tables. When they finally did talk that evening over the phone, the conversation started tensely. "I waited for you," she said, her voice tight, a mix of disappointment and hurt. "I know," he replied quickly, trying to explain. "I got stuck in traffic, and my phone died. I couldn't tell you. I don't know," she said, sighing. "I thought maybe you didn't want to come." "Of course I did," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I was looking forward to it all day. You know, I never miss our time together." The tension lingered, neither fully satisfied, both feeling frustrated. It was a small incident, yet it stirred doubts that neither had anticipated. She hung up, still upset, and he sat alone in his apartment, staring at his phone, feeling guilty and helpless. It was the first real test of the bond they had begun, to form a reminder that even small challenges could shake the sense of connection they had built. The days that followed were quiet, both giving the other space, yet each noticing a subtle change in the other's behavior. She was more cautious in her messages, shorter in her responses, and he noticed her hesitancy, interpreting it as distance. He became more reserved, unsure how to approach her without making things worse. The easy flow of their interactions had been disrupted, placed by a fragile tension neither fully understood. One evening, she saw him across the park, walking with a friend. Her heart jumped at the sight, a mix of relief and anxiety. She wanted to go over to speak to him, but then she saw them laughing together, and a wave of jealousy and doubt washed over her. She told herself she was overreacting, but the feeling lingered. She wondered if he had grown close to someone else, if she was imagining things, or if her insecurities were taking control. He noticed her too, standing at the edge of the park, hesitant. He wanted to wave, to approach her. but the unresolved tension from their last misunderstanding made him unsure of how she would react. He didn't want to upset her further, so he walked on, leaving her to wonder if he had intentionally avoided her that night. Both lay awake, replaying the same moments over and over. Her mind twisted small details into imagined betrayals. He worried that she might be pulling away, that his absence during the traffic incident had caused more harm than he realized. Neither could sleep easily, the unspoken doubts filling their minds and creating a silent barrier between them. It wasn't until a few days later that they finally confronted the tension. They met at a quiet park in the evening, where the sky had softened into shades of pink and purple. The air smelled faintly of rain and earth, creating a calm that contrasted with the storm of emotions they had been carrying. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice quiet but firm, "about us. And the other day, I don't know. I felt like maybe you didn't care." He took a deep breath, looking at her with genuine concern. "I do care," he said softly. "That day I really couldn't contact you. My phone died, and I got stuck in the rain. I wasn't avoiding you, I promise." She looked down, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering doubt. "I guess I just let my mind run away with me. I thought maybe I wasn't important enough." "You are," he said, stepping closer. "More than you know. I was just caught off guard. I hate that you felt like that. I should have found a way to reach you." They sat on a bench, the tension slowly easing as they talked honestly, for the first time, about their fears and insecurities. She admitted how her responsibilities and past experiences made her quick to worry, quick to doubt, and he shared how his past disappointments made him cautious. Afraid of causing hurt unintentionally, for hours they spoke, sharing thoughts and feelings they hadn't voiced before. It was uncomfortable at times, exposing vulnerabilities that neither wanted to show, but it was also liberating. Each word, each admission, became a bridge across the distance that had formed between them. They realized that misunderstandings were a natural part of getting closer. That doubt could exist even when care and love were genuine. By the end of the evening, they felt a sense of relief, a quiet reassurance that their connection could withstand these small storms. They didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. They simply needed honesty, patience, and understanding. They stood, brushing off the lingering raindrops from the bench, and walked together slowly, letting the silence between them speak as much as their words. Life continued to challenge them. She faced unexpected expenses, a demanding schedule, and moments of exhaustion that made it hard to think beyond the day. He dealt with pressures at work, the expectations of colleagues, and the weight of responsibility that sometimes made him emotionally distant. Yet through these challenges, they began learning how to support each other without needing to solve every problem, how to listen without judgment, and how to offer comfort even in small, simple ways. There were moments when old fears resurfaced. She sometimes worried that her life was too chaotic, that she would be too much for someone who had worked hard to create order. He sometimes questioned whether he could truly open up, whether sharing his past and his insecurities would make him appear weak. These doubts created tension, but instead of breaking them apart, each challenge became an opportunity to grow closer. One rainy evening, they found themselves caught in a sudden downpour, just like their first meeting. Instead of running for cover, they stood under a small awning, watching the rain fall. She laughed, a little nervously, and he smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of their shared moments. "I guess we keep meeting in the rain," she said, her voice soft. "Maybe it's a sign," he replied. "Or maybe we're just lucky to have found each other despite everything." They laughed together, the sound blending with the patter of rain, and for a moment the world seemed simpler, gentler. It was a reminder that even when life was messy, imperfect, and filled with misunderstandings, their connection could endure. They didn't need everything to be perfect. They only needed honesty, care, and a willingness to understand each other. By the end of part 3, both of them had learned an important lesson. Love wasn't just about moments of joy and connection. It was also about navigating doubt, fear, and misunderstanding. It required patience, empathy, and the courage to be vulnerable. And though their journey had begun with small smiles and quiet encounters, It was becoming clear that the depth of their bond could weather the challenges that life inevitably brought. Their hearts were still cautious, their trust fragile but growing. They had faced the first storm of doubt and had emerged closer, more aware of each other's needs and vulnerabilities. And in that understanding, they found the quiet beauty of a love that could withstand the tests of time. Even in a world full of uncertainty, days passed after their first real confrontation, an honest conversation. Both of them felt a change, subtle but meaningful. There was still a quiet tension in the back of their minds, a lingering awareness of how easily misunderstandings could arise, but there was also a deeper appreciation for each other. They began to notice small details in their daily lives that reminded them of the other, an aroma of coffee that reminded her of their late afternoon cafe meetings, the soft sound of a book flipping a page that reminded him of her gentle curiosity. He realized, more and more, that he didn't want to let her go. There was a calm, comforting weight to the thought of her presence, even if she wasn't physically there. He found himself making little plans, adjusting his schedule to allow more chances of seeing her, not out of obligation, but because the days felt incomplete without their shared moments. He, on the other hand, was preparing for an unusually free morning. Work had been busy the past weeks, but today he had no meetings, no pressing deadlines. He made himself a cup of coffee and paused by the window, looking out at the streets below. The city was alive, bustling, and full of possibilities. But more than anything, he felt grateful. Grateful for the small moments that had led him here, for the conversations that had deepened their bond, and for the quiet certainty that someone as remarkable as her had entered his life. They had planned to meet at their favorite park, the one where many of their most meaningful conversations had taken place. The air was crisp, the sunlight bright yet soft, casting golden reflections on the pavement. She arrived first, carrying a small basket filled with fresh bread, fruit, and a thermos of tea. She spread a blanket near the fountain, setting the scene for a simple, peaceful picnic. It wasn't grand, but it was thoughtful. It was filled with care and intention. He arrived shortly after, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked on his way to the park. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. The worries, stresses, and minor conflicts of life melted away, leaving only the joy of being together. He smiled, offering the flowers to her, and she accepted them with a soft laugh and a gentle touch. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm. "Good morning," she replied, feeling a calm happiness settle in her chest. They sat together on the blanket, enjoying the simple meal they had prepared. The bread was fresh, the fruit sweet, and the tea warm, but it was the company that made everything special. They spoke of ordinary things at first, the city, the weather, small observations about people passing by, but slowly. The conversation turned to deeper matters, their dreams, hopes, and reflections on the journey they had shared so far. "I never imagined life could feel this." "Calm," she said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Even when things are hard, it feels lighter knowing you're here." He nodded, reaching out to take her hand. "I feel the same way. I used to think life was just about responsibilities, schedules, and control. But now it's more than that. It's about moments like this, being with someone who understands and cares, who sees you fully." They laughed together, a soft, easy sound that echoed in the quiet of the park. She rested her head briefly on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone. He held her hand firmly, yet gently, feeling the warmth of her touch and the quiet joy of sharing these moments. After a while, they decided to walk. The path wound around the park, past trees glistening in the sunlight and the soft ripples of the fountain. They didn't need to speak. The silence between them was full of understanding. Occasionally, she would point to something interesting, a bird landing on a branch, a child chasing a butterfly, and he would smile, genuinely interested, listening and responding with attention that made her feel valued. As they reached a quiet corner of the park, he stopped. "There's something I want to show you," he said, a little shyly. He led her to a small garden tucked away from the main paths. Flowers of every color bloomed around them, their petals glistening with morning dew. In the center of the garden was a bench. the perfect place to sit and take in the beauty of the space. "I wanted to bring you somewhere peaceful," he said. "Somewhere we could just be, away from everything else." She smiled, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It's beautiful," she said softly, taking his hand. They sat together on the bench, letting the quiet of the garden wash over them. The conversation turned to their journey together, the first rainy day when they met, the misunderstandings that had tested their bond, and the small gestures that had brought them closer. They laughed at their initial hesitations, the moments of doubt, and the awkward silences that had once felt so significant. "I never thought someone could make me feel seen like this," admitted, her voice low but firm. "I've been through a lot, and I didn't know if anyone would notice, really notice, who I am. But you see me." He looked at her, his eyes soft and sincere. "I see you. Every part of you. The strong, caring side, the moments of doubt, the small quirks that make you. And I wouldn't want it any other way." She felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming warmth of being understood. He reached out, gently wiping it away, and she leaned into him, feeling the comfort of someone who had become a constant in her life. For a long time, they simply sat together, holding hands, speaking softly, and enjoying the quiet intimacy of shared presence. It was a love that didn't need drama or grandeur. It was quiet, consistent, and deeply fulfilling. Each small gesture, each moment of care, had built something Lestanja foundation of trust, respect, an understanding that neither had anticipated, but both cherished deeply as the sun climbed higher. They decided to walk to a nearby cafe for a late morning snack. Along the way, they talked about dreams for the future, small hopes and bigger aspirations alike. She spoke of wanting to create a safe, happy life for her younger brother, of learning new skills and of exploring the city beyond the familiar streets she knew so well. He shared his desire to travel more, to connect with people in meaningful ways, and to continue growing into someone who could give and receive love freely. They laughed, teased, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of being together. There was no rush, no pressure, only the quiet joy of shared experience. Every step, every glance, every touch reminded them that the love they shared was grounded in reality, rooted in everyday life, in support, patience, and the quiet beauty of noticing each other by the time they returned to the park. The day was warm and golden. Children played in the distance, birds chirped in the trees, and the city hummed with life. They sat once more by the fountain, watching the reflections of sunlight on the water. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I think this is what love is," she said quietly. "Not just the excitement or the happiness, but the comfort, the understanding, and the way someone can make life feel lighter even when it's hard." He nodded, holding her closer. "Yes, and it's not perfect, but it's ours. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." They stayed like that for hours, speaking softly, laughing occasionally, and simply being. The city around them continued its usual rhythm, but they were in a space of their own, a bubble of quiet happiness and mutual care as the sun began to set. Painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, they stood and walked together slowly, hand in hand. Each step felt intentional, a reflection of the journey they had shared from strangers. Passing under umbrellas in the rain to a love that had grown through honesty, patience, and quiet gestures. They reached the edge of the park, where the streets began again, bustling with people and cars. But the world felt different now. It wasn't the chaos that had once overwhelmed them. It was a place where they could exist together, grounded in the knowledge that they had each other. He stopped and turned to her, looking into her eyes. "I know life will continue to challenge us. There will be hard days, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But I also know this will face it together, and that makes all the difference." She smiled, feeling a sense of certainty she had never felt before. Together, she agreed, no matter what. And so they walked into the city, side by side, hearts open, hands intertwined, ready to face whatever the future held. Their love wasn't dramatic or perfect. It was real, grounded, and resilient. It was built on shared experiences, understanding, patience, and the quiet courage to be vulnerable with each other. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, they continued to grow together. They celebrated small victories, comforted each other through setbacks, and cherished every ordinary moment that became extraordinary simply because they shared it. Their story was a reminder that love isn't always about grand gestures or instant passion. It's about noticing, caring, and choosing each other every single day. And in that quiet, human, and deeply real way, they had found the most beautiful loved one that would continue to grow, inspire, and endure.